Hey, folks, and welcome to another podcast episode of The Lonesome Cowboy. And today I got another great guest coming to me from, I think, Altamont, or is it Elora this time, Nathan?
It's actually so I'm a bit peripatetic, as they say. So I'm in Carleton Place right now, Carleton Place,
Okay.
Ontario,
And
which
this
is
is,
uh, which is in Eastern Ontario, not too far from Almont, and about 5 hour drive from Elora. Yeah.
there you go. Nathan, tell the folks who you are.
So yeah, my name's Nathan Sloniowski. I've been making music like the Lonesome Cowboy for just over 40 years, and started in a high school punk band and kind of went from there. I was listening to punk and bluegrass at the same time.
Wow.
So yeah, it was kind of, the Clash or Willie P. Bennett.
Great.
Uh, yeah, so this I just released my second. I call them solo albums just because I've always been in other bands.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
in
Okay.
two others right now.
Sure.
And so the latest album was called The Lost Love Letter to a Small Town, and it's a gratitude project, a bunch of songs that I wrote about the small town I grew up in, Elora, Ontario. And
Hmm.
of course, a lot of the songs are kind of composites. I did my decade in Toronto, like a lot of people, but the other 40 odd years has been spent in small towns in Ontario and Quebec. So, Elora, Wakefield, Quebec, Calabogie, Ontario, Almont, Ontario, Carleton Place, Ontario. Yeah, so
Cool.
small towns are kind of my thing, and I chose to honor the people and the creative spirit that has given me decades of creative energy.
Yeah.
And so that's what the Lost Love Letter to a Small Town is all about.
Yeah, well, I was looking at the songs on the album. You have the lyrics on your website, which is great. And I definitely stories going on. I'm hearing forgiveness, reconciliation, stories about characters. These are real places and real people, right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah. And again, composite, right? So as you know, when you tell a story, you're,
Yeah.
you are telling a version of the truth,
Yeah.
and of course, things have to rhyme, Brian. So,
Yeah.
I read where there was one song, and it was called Archie's Good Night. It's about a guy
Oh
who
yeah.
I knew who literally dies on the dance floor, like and I sang it. I sang it at an event, and a woman came up to me and said, you say in the lyric that the woman he was dancing with was Lisa. And, I was the one. Uh, my name is Lee, and
Oh, nice.
I said, first of all, I needed two syllables. Second of all, I did some heavy research down at the Legion and down at a couple of local bars, and
Yeah.
I was told it was Lisa. And she, I was directed to the beer store where she worked, and she came out from the back and said, "Yeah, I was there," and and Lee countered with. Well, she might have been there too, but I can tell you that it was me because nobody danced with me for 10 friggin' years.
Gotta love it. Yeah, that's great. Now, bury the hatchet. Now that I thought it was maybe okay, this guy's coming back to Elora and whatever he felt bad about the town, but it's about two towns, right?
So yeah, so there's a neighboring town, right? And
Okay.
of course, whenever you have a neighboring small town, you've got neighboring rivalry. And the neighboring town is Fergus. So
Oh,
Elora,
yes.
Ontario, was kind of this had more of an Irish, happy-go-lucky, let's stay in the pub sort of vibe, and Fergus was the more temperate. Let's build more stone buildings and work harder and be richer. And so there was always a rivalry between Fergus and Elora, and it got so bad that twice in 100 years, the Reeve of Elora and the Mayor of Fergus had a bury the hatchet ceremony. So they met right in between the two towns, and literally buried a
Buried the
hatchet.
hatchet. Hey,
So the song is kind of about, the different spirit of each town, and it's a story about, and this again something I went into the archives and research. So the
sure.
bury the hatchet ceremonies happened, but the temperance ladies of Fergus would come and march into downtown Elora because there was a famous watering hole called the Dalby Hotel. And the legend was, and I guess there's a lot of truth to it, that if you shot a cannon on a Sunday into the Dalby Hotel, which is in Elora, you'd kill half of the men of Fergus because they had nowhere to drink.
I love it. I love it.
So
That's
yeah, so
fantastic.
so we've got and the other little tidbit there is in Alora they decided, you know what, we're actually having too much fun. We actually need to temper it, and so those temperance ladies have got something going there. So they
I
started
love
something
it.
called the Friendly Society, and the Friendly Society it was something that you belong to, to only have a few drinks, to not get totally hammered.
Sure.
And so, a bunch of the elders of the community kind of signed up to the Friendly Society. Yeah, let's try this temperate thing. Not temperance, like not dry, but
Yeah.
maybe a little less wet. And the Friendly Society was disbanded due to the defaults of many of its members. So they decided, you know what, we're not into this at all. Let's just go back to the way we were.
Gotcha. That's a great act. That makes me think about an idea for a song myself because we had a hotel here that was by the steel plant, and
Yeah,
the wives used to get mad because when the workers would get off work, they'd
yeah,
pull into I think it was called the New Ontario at that time, New Ontario. They'd pull into work and they'd cash their checks and they'd drink half their checks away or whatever the case may be,
yeah,
and the wives were mad, and the police chief actually down to the bar and told them you can't do that anymore.
yeah.
I
Well,
thought,
yeah, that was one of
there
the
you
problems
go.
with Elora going back to the 1800s is that it was a mill processing town.
Oh yeah.
So people would come and bring, the year's worth of produce or the year's worth of horse harnesses or whatever they were doing. That was a trading center. But as well as being a trading center with a lot of, processing mills because it had two rivers running through, they had a lot of bars and distilleries and breweries. And so, same sort of thing, except it wouldn't be the weekly paycheck. It would be your annual paycheck, And
Wow.
unfortunately, there were some sad stories in terms of
Yeah.
the crop that never, the cash crop where the cash got dissociated from the crop somehow. And a very sad man comes home to his family to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
along the way, something
Yeah.
bad happened. I was
Yeah.
robbed.
Yeah, that's it. No, do you still live in Altamont, Nathan, or are you in Elora, or are you like you
Yeah,
said,
so
you're
so my wife and I went back. We went back after, it was just before the pandemic, 2018. We lived in Eastern Ontario in a
yeah,
town called Almont,
Almont. Okay, sorry.
Almont, yeah, and about a half hour outside of Ottawa.
Hmm.
Uh, we went back to Elora, and we were lucky. We call ourselves. Our people our age, Brian, the sandwich generation, so you have old uns on top and young uns on the bottom, and everyone's kind of, needing something, and
And you're sandwiched in the middle.
you're sandwiched in the middle. So part of our sandwich was back in Elora, and we had some people that needed some help, and we were otherwise pretty fancy free,
Hmm.
so we decided, let's just we'll rent out our place and we'll rent something down there, and we lived down there for a year, and it was beautiful, and it was part of the inspiration for the Lost Love Letter to a Small Town because
Yeah.
when I was, a young man, I left this creative community and, was nurtured by it and, kind of taken along. And, it was at that time, it was like a 1970s kind of artist and hippie haven, like there was
Yeah,
a,
okay.
creative juice and I loved it, right? I was like fly to honey. And so I go back, as somebody in my late 50s at the time, and same thing happened, right? Like I got embraced again by the creatives of the town. And yeah, so now the pandemic happened, and then we came back to Eastern Ontario, and we're now in a town very much like Fergus is to Elm, or Fergus is to Elora, Carlton Place is to Almont, right? So
Okay.
Almont's like got maybe, self-professed, a little bit more vibe, a little bit more hip, a little bit more of that. And Carlton Place, a little more industrious,
Yeah, yeah.
people drive trucks that are a little bit newer.
Now, this album actually, it started as a book.
Yeah, oh yeah, you're right. It did. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was reading that. It says started as a book.
Yeah.
So, what made you say, no, I'm going to make it songs instead?
Yeah, that's interesting. You picked up on that. So I did start it as, kind of a memoir, and I have made, a living as a writer, a storyteller, one way or another, right?
Oh, okay.
And So I was sitting there, on my keyboard. I was going into the archives, doing the research, and do all the things you do to write books. I have written some nonfiction books and chapters of books, but first
Hmm.
time I tried something in this realm. And at that point, I had officially retired to pursue this creative bent full time, and I sat there, with like here I was got papers, research, whatever, notes all around me, and my back was getting sore, and I'm staring at the keyboard, and I'm thinking, you know, like fuck that. I thought I was supposed to be retiring from this, and here I am sitting in front of a keyboard
Yeah.
going, and I went and I as I picked up a guitar,
Yeah. And you
right? And I go, oh, that's what I should be doing, of course.
writing songs.
So I should be,
Yeah.
that's if there's a post profession project, that's what I should be doing. So a lot of that research, from the book and the stories that I, dug up, about the temperance movement
Yeah, right.
and all that stuff, some of that turned into songs.
Yeah, that's very cool. Now, um, you said you retired, but you always told stories for a living.
Yeah.
Tell me about what you did in another life.
Well, yeah, and actually, the life has returned, and I found out that I'm a really bad retired person,
Oh, I would be too.
and so that nonsense stopped. So along with having three music projects, which is almost a full-time job in unto itself,
Yeah, tell me about it.
I've unretired, but yeah. So I started. Let's see. Wow, it was like I basically the term I use is from hack to flack and back, and so I started as a journalist, and then I would go into kind of marketing and creative agencies, and
Sure.
then go back to journalism and publishing, and I kind of flip-flopped. But again, at the core of it is I'm somebody who tells stories. And right now, yeah, I work for an AI software company in Vancouver. And
Oh, the evil
yeah,
AI.
evil AI. Yeah, we apply something called machine learning to it's very exciting to water treatment plants. So
Oh,
underground, that like the Calgary, the explosion of the water mains in
yeah,
Calgary
right. That kind of stuff.
happening all over the world.
Okay.
Old infrastructure. So if you have underground sensors that monitor to the flow of what's going through the pipe and underground cameras that kind of go click, 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 you can make sense of that data in real time and based on the machine learning algorithm, it can start to learn like what is the pattern. Then it can start to tell you, hey, you're going to have a problem a week from now. Like you have a chance to fix it, right? Instead of
Cool.
having it blow up on you and shutting down the water for the, city of Calgary is one example.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's how we do that.
That's cool. Now, I have to ask you also about this album because you got quite the band on this project.
Yeah.
Were these like neighbors of yours or just buddies or how'd you go finding these
So
Class A players?
the buddy network did go into effect, and it was Ken Friesen, who is my best buddy. So Ken is a producer. He's got the gold records on the
Got the
wall.
hardware shelf, does he?
Got the hardware, so built the original studio for the Tragically Hip, the Bathhouse.
Oh, right, yeah.
Worked on a bunch of the hip stuff, worked on Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, worked on Monkey Junk. He's the guy's always in motion. He's also a phenomenal live sound guy. So he works on Canada's Got Talent and
Hmm.
Government General Awards, this, that. So I said to Ken, like the pandemic had not quite ended. Um, and I think we were early 2020-ish. And I said, look, I got about these songs. Like I'd like to do an album, and how do we do that? And he said, well, the way we do it these days is, we track you in the studio and then we send out for tracks, and
Yeah.
and I can get really good people. And the fact is, like the band I've been in the longest is called the Ragged Flowers, and we just released an EP,
Mm.
6-song EP, called Flying Machine, and we call that an alt neo psychedelic folk rock. So check that out. All our stuff, our old stuff and new stuff, is now in the Streamosphere.
I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah, but uh, I've always made albums, including, I did another solo album about 20 years ago. I've always made it, live off the floor, like where you're staring at people. So I said,
Yeah.
well, let's try this, newfangled way of doing things with a click track in your ear and all that stuff. And I hated it, Brian. Like, and you know what?
It sucks, yeah.
There have been some Grammy award-winning albums that have been done that way,
Well,
and
yeah.
and a lot of music is made that way, but it's just I've never done it that way. I didn't like it. So I said, Ken, I can't do it. What else could we do? He said, well, the interesting thing is like anybody we want to get, we can get because nobody's on tour, and he said,
And they'll
nobody's
take the work too.
nobody's made an album in a room for a couple of years. So like I can make some calls, right? And it's like, well, who you want to call? And so he basically got from the Blackie and the Rodeo Kings network, John Diamond on bass.
Yeah.
I actually brought in the drummer who Davide Davide Dorenzo, I believe, is has got a tricky last name there, and uh, he plays the drums like a piano. Like I'd seen him, and it was like, oh my God, I've
Wow.
never seen a drummer like this. So we brought in Davide, we brought in John on the rhythm section, and then Steve O'Connor, who plays with a lot with Jim Cuddy and Blue Rodeo on keys, and then we got what was it, one day into it, and we were way ahead on tracking because we were just nailing them like 2, 3 takes. Like I'd pre-recorded and sent lyrics and
Yeah.
kind of arrangement sheets, but they were just such crackerjack guys. And then Ken said, Jimmy Boskill has heard about what's going on here. He lives right across the street from Steve O'Connor in Coburg. Like he could be here in a couple hours. And I said, well, call him. Let's go. And yeah.
You didn't spare anything, did you?
So that was, yeah, and we were in the bathhouse, right? So it's the bathhouse, Tragically Hip studio. It's still available. It's quite reasonably, actually, really priced, and it's got it's a residential studio, so you live there. So we lived there
Wow.
for 3 days and 3 nights, and my son was also in on it. My son Gabe is an engineer, audio engineer, so he did
Wow.
the engineering, and then he did the mixing with Ken's supervision. And he said, Dad, like you guys, he says, I'm going to bed. Like you guys are gonna kill me, like the way you're carrying on.
Yeah.
And we
That's
did
how
carry
it's
on.
done, son. That's how
So
it's
yeah,
done.
well, you know what? I couldn't set any expectation. Like we all didn't know each other that well, and but it gelled, and so we ended up making music and having fun and having great meals, and John makes
Sounds like
great
it.
martinis. So
Man.
we slept somewhere between 3 and 4 hours a night, right? And the rest of the time we just celebrated,
Yeah.
making music. Yeah. So it
You
was a beautiful experience.
I am jealous. So jealous. Now, you've obviously hit on something here because I've been looking at your 2024 show dates and also I saw nothing but sold out. Like, congratulations and
Yeah, thank
fantastic.
you. Yeah, yeah. So uh, you got to self-produce, these days. Like, unfortunately, the artist who doesn't have a manager, which I don't, or a label, which I don't, you got to hustle. And so I tend to, like, I've got a band, getting those same players is not possible anymore. They're all on tour. They're in
Yeah.
Nashville, or they're
Yeah.
making this album or that album,
Yeah.
and we knew that going in.
Sure.
And Ken Friesen, the producer, he actually told me, he said, "Listen, because we had a pretty big album launch. We opened up the Focus concert series, which
Okay. Yeah.
250 people in the
I
Almont
wanted to
Open
get involved in
Hall.
that. I don't know.
Yeah, and yeah, the new artistic director is there,
Cool.
and so you could, we could email. I could put you in touch with them.
That's cool. Excellent.
Um,
Excellent.
but yeah, so we had a pretty big gig, and Ken, he actually talked me out of calling up, the studio band. He said, "Listen, if you do manage to get them, like chances of getting all of them are almost nil, but even if you got most of them, um, you're going to do it once and once ever. And if you put together some good local players, to present that music, you'll be able to do it again and again." And he was absolutely right. So,
Yeah. Good point.
we did our first sort of sold out show, and people had a lot of fun. We had a ton of fun. And so we've been invited to do others. And we'll, we won't play at the drop of a hat, but almost. And we're doing house concerts, we're doing small halls. I love small halls.
Yeah, I know. It's
Uh,
great.
yeah, and then bigger halls as well. I've got an application in too for City Folk Festival in Ottawa, so I hope that goes well. But and then the other parts of my concert dates, like the Ragged Flowers, the band I talked about,
Hmm.
REP. We've been doing shows, and there's a third band called the Maywoods. So you might know that John Prine was born in Maywood, Illinois,
Okay.
and that's a quartet that I put together, two guys and two girls, and we present John Prine's songbook, but totally with our, like, it's not a karaoke approach. It's our own take on everything. So we've got four guitars, and we've got four voices, and we do a lot. We do harmonies, 3 and 4 part harmonies in every song. And so that one, we've got a gig coming up at the Carlton Place Town Auditorium. So that's another 250 seater,
Nice.
uh, and that's a ton of fun. So yeah,
No
and
kidding.
and it's kind of like people say, well, how do you keep your head straight between the three different bands? And I said, well, repetition, practice is a good thing. Uh,
Hmm.
but also, I just find it just getting easier and easier because it's like anything. Like the more you play, the better you play. And
And that's about it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah. I mean, speaking of guys like, Blackie and the Rodeo Kings and stuff like that, I mean, I've had Stephen Fearing on the show and,
oh yeah, Steven's
um,
great.
yeah. And, my friend Duncan Fremlin there from Whiskey Jack and, Stompin' Tom's old banjo player,
Nice.
he, um, he said the same thing you know, produce shows, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
eh,
Yeah, and that
trying
means
to run
I'll
around
tell you,
doing, yeah.
like it means jumping in your car, and I measured, because you can report this back to Revenue Canada in terms of the mileage, but to put up posters, for I did it like a 60 seater. We did sell out. It was kind of in the middle of nowhere in McDonald's.
Uh-huh.
Ontario. Beautiful room. I've played a few times before,
Yep.
but I knew that to draw people, we'd have to work it. And so, a lot of local media, so you do like your kind of little press release explaining what the music is and what the album's about, but also 210 kilometers of postering, right? So,
Wow.
put posters up at the fry truck, put posters up, at the laundromat, put posters up in the arena, put posters up in the town halls, where that people are the libraries where people are going to gather, and that's how you get them out.
Yeah.
They're not
Grassroots,
gonna
eh?
they're
Yeah.
not gonna find you, and then it does. Thankfully, it does start to.
Hmm.
That there you build some kind of recognition, and so now I walk around and they go, oh yeah, when's your next gig, it's like, as a matter of fact,
As a matter of
there's
fact.
one next week. You should come.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's
So
wonderful. So, um, you are retired, so music is a full-time job for you now, right?
no, remember
Oh, are you
I've
still doing the,
actually,
yeah,
yeah,
you're
so
still
I've
doing
basically got
AI.
well, I call it two and a half full-time jobs. So I've got kind of the day gig. I've got the evening gig with music, and then the other half is the grandson gig. So
Oh, see, you got one of those too, eh?
yeah. So my wife officially looks after our little new grandson. He's
Oh,
two.
that's nice. Yeah.
But she brings him to our place about 3 times a week. So I get down on the floor
Oh,
and
yeah.
play with them and take them on adventures and
Yeah.
stuff. So
My grand,
I tell you, that's the
yeah.
right now. That even surpasses music is the
Oh,
greatest
yeah.
joy
Yeah.
of life.
Unfortunately, my grandson, he's going on 4. Felix lives in Edmonton with his parents, but when we get together, man, last
Yeah,
time we were out in the backyard and crawling in there and playing
yeah,
army men with our
yeah,
going
yeah,
after the bad guys. It was like, oh, I loved it.
yeah.
Absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Well, and
Well,
our little guy is musical, it turns out too.
oh
So
yeah, mine too.
yeah, so
Yeah,
we gave him a shaker at his, what was it? It was kind of like he might have been 3 months old, and there was music, and he grabbed the shaker, and he actually it wasn't in perfect rhythm, but he knew what to do,
yeah,
and the next one is a pitch pipe, right? So
yeah.
I went into the Long and McQuaid and I said, look, what do you get somebody who's 6 months old to make? And the guy looks around, he goes, wow, that's a tough one. He goes,
Yeah,
hey, how about a pitch pipe? Because, it has no sharp edges and you
yeah,
just have to blow into it. And
yeah.
and he loved his little pitch pipe
See,
for a
there you go.
while.
And mine's got a little ukulele and a harmonica,
Oh, yeah.
and I tell you how crazy this kid is. He's going to be hopefully into music. At daycare, We Will Rock You came on. He built a stage with these wooden large blocks,
Yeah.
picked one of them up, and so he could have 1 foot higher than the other. He built a bit of a riser, and he started playing along, and then invited all the classmates on stage to perform. And I went, it was so cool that the staff had to send his parents pictures and tell the story.
Yeah, that's great.
Isn't
That's
that
great.
something? So this whole DIY music career world that we're into right now,
Yeah, well, it's a tricky thing.
isn't it? So things have changed quite a bit since, once upon a time when you and I said, hey, when we get in the music business and get a recording contract, those kinds of things are too few and far between right now.
Yeah.
What's the kind of biggest challenge that you have, Nathan, right now when it comes to this new DIY music thing?
Well, the biggest one is paying for the damn project, right? So,
Yeah.
in like 20 years ago when I released an album, like I literally sold 600, I'd have been $15 CDs at the time, but at the local bookstore, right?
Wow.
People bought music, right? And so people still support local artists around this part of Ontario, which is wonderful. But people have been weaned off of paying for music, and it's just sort of out there.
Hmm.
So when you see um, I've gone on the streamosphere with CD Baby, right, which gets
Yeah.
you Apple Music and Spotify and YouTube everywhere. And you see a check for $13, right? Like,
Wow, you got that much?
yeah.
After 3 years, I don't think I got
Point,
11 bucks.
.0002 cents per play.
Yeah, right.
So that, that's the biggest thing, right? So that, that's, and I just, people for a while were trying Bandcamp, and I know people who switched everything to Bandcamp and insisted on, that's the only way you can get my music. Well, okay, but now no one gets your music.
Hmm.
And, so I talked to someone like in the Maywoods band. I've got some younger folks in that band,
Yeah.
and I ask them, and they say, look, you got to do the Streamosphere because otherwise, like, no one knows. Like that's where people just
Yeah.
expect to find you.
Hmm.
Uh, so that kind of revenue stream disappears. So it's for
Yeah.
me, it's been about self-producing shows, making shows interesting, and
You talk just like
developing.
Duncan does.
Yeah, developing. The other thing I've learned too, and definitely comes with age and kind of being comfortable in your own skin is telling stories. There's one school of thought, and here's an interesting one. I went to a Pat Metheny show
Oh,
last,
cool.
and Pat, typically does not talk, right? Like he doesn't talk. So he
Hmm.
starts this pitter patter in the first song. He said, "You know what? I've already said more than I've ever said in the last 30 years of live performance." And he said it's song one, and he said, and guess what? It's not going to stop, right? And I just loved it, right? Because
He
I've
finds he
seen.
has to change, eh?
Well, I don't know what he just decided, like, he's a guy who, like
Yeah.
us, he's, there's still rope left, but it's not a ton of it.
Yeah.
And so there's a guy who's like, I wanna tell the story of how I came to music, how I became inspired, by the players along the way. And so yeah, I found that part of a show, especially if you're doing a solo or duo show, is to tell those stories,
Hmm.
and don't be shy about it because people, I can like if I do a song and I decide not to tell a story ahead of it, you kind of get a, oh, well, that was
Yeah.
nice.
Out of context, eh?
If you give the context, you're bringing people in to
Yeah.
everything that went into that
Yeah.
4 minute
Yeah.
song,
Yeah.
and their eyes are wide, and they're grooving it. And if you do that for an entire performance, it really does make a difference,
I
right?
do I do projected visuals even to that point.
Very good. Yeah.
Here's what I'm
Yeah.
singing about kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, in fact, with the Maywoods, the last show we did it at one of these Civitan halls, and it's like a low flat hall, but it held a lot of people. And because it's a Civitan hall, they've got screens because a lot of weddings and things happen there, chambers of commerce meetings.
Sure.
So they said, "Oh, do you want the projector?" And I said, "Well, what projector?" And he said, "Oh, well, we got two screens you can pull down." And I said, "Then there's four TV screens." And so
Nice.
we brought in images of John Prine
Oh,
and
great.
throughout, and quotes, right? And again, people loved it. You're bringing them
Nice.
inside the story.
Beautiful.
So yeah, so you do need new ways to do things. I'm going to the Folk Alliance International Conference in Montreal
Oh,
to
okay. Yeah.
try to learn more because, like,
Yeah.
like all of us, I know what I know, and
Hmm.
I know that's not enough, right? So like, I want to keep doing this and keep,
Yeah.
investing in my music career. I'm gonna I have to get better, not just musically, but I have to get better at that business part of it. And so I would like to set up some little tours and things. And I was speaking to Amanda Riom. I went to one of her
Oh,
shows,
yeah.
actually two of her shows back to back, because I really loved her music. She's a
Yeah.
Métis artist,
Yes.
and um, and she's her own woman. Like she does the whole thing. Like she manages herself. She books her own tours. She's records really good albums. Like she's not skimping in terms of production quality, and she's doing it right. And I said, Amanda, like I want to know what you know. And she goes, well, are you coming to the Folk Alliance International Conference? And
Yeah,
as a matter of fact, I am. I booked
there
it.
you
All
go.
right. Well, she goes, look me up, and I'll
Well,
introduce you around. And the
nice.
other thing is folk music. It's now Folk Music Canada, but it
Yes,
used
I
to.
was at FMO in August this year,
Yeah,
actually, my first
yeah,
one.
yeah. I wanted to go. I couldn't get around to it. In
Yeah.
fact, you know why? My producer's daughter got married.
Ah, that'll do it. There you
I
go.
couldn't miss that. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, joining organizations like Folk Music Canada, and folk is, as they say, it's music for people. Like, don't worry
Exactly.
about, is it only an acoustic guitar or a
Hmm.
banjo? It's music for folks,
Yeah.
and it's a well-supported organization.
Yes. Very.
It's government funding, really pro people. Like, you got a question, you call somebody, you
Hmm.
talk to a human who can really impart something. Uh,
Yes.
I've found them great, and
So do I.
I'm hoping the same for Folk Alliance International. And then, of
Yeah.
course, people like you, the community stations. Like, I really am putting work into reaching out to community radio, across the
Yeah.
country. I've had really good success in Ontario. I haven't
Yeah.
quite the rest of the country yet, but I'm
Yeah.
getting played in Ottawa and in Hamilton and Toronto. So, and by you know DJs I really respect. So it's
Good.
just cool to see your song up against Bonnie Raitt and Stephen Fearing, right? Holy
You gotta
crap.
love it.
That's a big deal. It still is a very big deal to me.
Yeah.
So
I hate to cut you off, Nathan, but we're coming down to the end.
no problem,
Tell
Brian.
the
It's a
folks
pleasure.
where they can find more about you and your music.
Yeah, well, just the Lost Love Letter to a Small Town is the easy way. Just put that into the Googleator and you'll find my website, which is www, this is the hard part, Nathan Sloniowski, NLONIOWSKI.com. So, most people can remember the Lost Love Letter to a Small Town,
There
and
you go. Yeah,
we'll
that's
get
the easy way to do it.
that'll get you the website. That'll get you to links, to the Streamosphere stuff. That'll get you links to the shows. And I hope to see you out there, everybody. And thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, thank you. And I have to say one thing. You look like Randy Bachman.
I get that. I get that
Yeah,
from
a
time to
friend of
time.
mine plays bass for him.
Okay, yeah.
He's from
I
the Sioux, actually.
by comparison, I feel like I'd have to chop my fingers off to
Yeah,
to really. but,
love it.
but he too has been an inspiration my whole life. So.
Yeah, no kidding. Fantastic. Nathan, thank you so much. I'm so glad I bumped into you. I hope we can keep this connection going because you're a great resource and a great attitude.
Well, thanks, Brian, and to all your viewers and listeners, have a great musical day.
You bet. Thanks, brother. We'll talk to you again.
Take care.
All right. Well, that was great.